Okay. There comes a time where every man must sit and talk to the police. But tonight, I'm doing it for the right reasons. Tonight we have Tom here, who is a serving policeman. Lee is with me as well. We're going to talk about you, your life experience, but also you have been diagnosed with PTSD.
Yes.
Can we talk about, before we get to the middle, like, can we have a little build up? You were a policeman, you are a policeman. Why did you join? How have you got to where you are?
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, of course. So apparently since the age of 4, I always wanted to be a police officer. I can't remember that, but my mum tells me that's what I wanted to do. So at the age of 18, left school, became a police officer.
Okay.
I worked on shift, I worked on neighbourhood teams, rural policing, training new officers, proactive teams, CID, different various guises of CID. I did loads of things whilst I was there. And I've loved just helping people. Like everyone that I've dealt with, you go to a burglary, you deal with that person like they're your mum. That's a core value that I have, is I'm dealing with my mum on how I would like my mum to be dealt with in that time.
Okay.
And I think that's why I joined. I just want to help people.
Okay.
Keep people safe, and just try and make it a little bit of a better place, because the world isn't a nice place most of the time.
No.
And if you can make that little difference, after 22 years, I've still got that passion to help people. I don't know how, but I have.
Yeah. So how, as a policeman serving, how has the service changed in regards to you and what you need to be a policeman?
I'd say when I joined, it was very much a bravado environment where no one talked about feelings. No one talked about the things that they'd experienced. We still went to those horrible scenes, but I'd say back then there were times when we probably dealt with it better, but informally. So after our Thursday late shifts, we'd always go and meet up. We'd meet up as a group and we'd sit down and just talk about our week. And we'd have a laugh and a joke about the things we'd experienced. Not in a derogatory way, but you'd always talk about what you'd been to, the jokes you played on each other, and it was a way you decompressed before you went home for your days off.
Yeah.
And as the world got busier and the demands on us got more and more, that stopped.
Right.
Was that formally arranged, or that just happened?
That's
Was
what
that
we
like
did
a
as
shift
team. Yeah.
in the pub?
So if you were on a shift, you were basically a family. That's the culture, is you're a family and you're going to look after each other. And I mean, I remember when I joined, you were with your work team, they were your family, and on your days off you then met up and associated with each other, you hung about, you went to the cinema, you went for dinner, you went to play football, because you were just that family and everyone was there for each other, and we all talked about what we've been through.
Kindred spirits, i.e. sharing scenarios and places, that sounds like a community.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. As you may know, I have a bee in my bonnet about community. What's refreshing to hear you say, okay, speaking as somebody who isn't au fait with the workings of the police and how they go, apart from being on the wrong end of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's well documented. I've been arrested a few times and all that, but in the last 15 years since I got sober, I haven't. Yeah. So I've had no dealings with the police at all. The only thing that I have heard, and we see, is the bad side of the police.
Yeah.
Sometimes policemen who don't want to help.
Yes.
Who are left in the bravado world and do all that. We're not here to talk about them. And everyone, every single person in the human race is a different being.
Yeah.
What's refreshing to me as an outsider is that the first thing you said was, I want to help people.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I want to drive fast cars, I want to bust robbers, or, you want to actually help people. Yeah. How do you see yourself in the police force?
How do you mean?
Right, so if you want to help and you're in a situation with things, you said that you want to treat people like who've been burgled or damaged like your mum, but are you one of many like that?
Yes.
You are?
So there's always the negative press. It's easier to put negative things about the police in the press because it sells papers. That's just my opinion.
No, I get that.
There's always going to be bad people in every single organisation, whether it be working for BT, working for Virgin, working for the police, the NHS. There's always going to be bad people, but the majority of people in the police are there to help people. That's why they want to do it.
That's cool. It's good to hear that from a policeman. And also, I'm not being funny, you don't have, and please don't take this the wrong way, but you don't have the air of a policeman about you. Right, you don't walk into the room, look at everyone sternly, and I know a few coppers are like that. But
so do I.
Yeah,
and they exist.
And they do. Yeah.
Say they don't.
No, but what's refreshing is so the first thing is to help people. The second thing is to solve whatever's going on where possible.
Yeah.
Now you must have seen some pretty horrendous things.
I have, yeah.
In the police force. Do you mind if I ask what was the lead up to the PTSD?
So over 22 years, I dealt with a lot of death, whether that be someone jumped in front of a train, whether it be, my first sudden death wasn't your usual more mature person that's passed through natural causes. It was someone who shot themselves in the head with a 410 shotgun.
Yikes.
That was the first dead body that I'd ever seen.
Right.
Loads of death, did loads of proactive teams, and then took the jump into being a detective. So from there, that led me into going to what we call force CID within my force. So you will deal with all unnatural deaths, so suicides, or deaths that could potentially be murder, suspicious circumstances. So on that team, a lot of hangings, shotguns, bodies in rivers, things like that. All things... I thought I was better at talking and opening up about my experience, especially at home with my other half, who's really pro mental health, and she helped me to talk about some things. And you basically would just get on with it. Like, at the time on the team I was on, the aftercare when you went to a traumatic death was, you're right. And in that moment, all you wanted to do was write your report for your coroner
And get out.
and get home. And then your decompression time was basically 20 minutes driving home. Straight into family life. Your partner who's had a difficult day, you wanted to help them with their problems, you've got a little one, there's no decompression.
Yep, absolutely.
And then just over 4 years ago, I had an interview for the job that I do. So I'm now working within intelligence.
Okay.
I was successful. One of the people that went for that job was a good friend of mine who used to work on my old team. That night he took his own life.
Oh, okay. I need to ask the next question. Because he didn't get it, or because that was the final straw?
So
It's difficult to know, I suppose.
couldn't honestly tell you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought it was down to that. It may be that just in that moment, everything,
It was too much.
yeah.
That's really
But
sad.
he would have seen the things that I saw. We went to a number of deaths together, a number of horrific scenes we went to together. And he would have had the same struggles that I had sometimes with those scenes, I would imagine. But he's not here to ask.
No. When we spoke to Joe, who leads a paramedic team for the ambulance service, he very similarly saw everything horrendously, and then one of his friends then hung themselves. So you're in a position where the final straw for you was that his death.
Yeah, so from that point, I experienced flashbacks to different suicides that I've been to.
Right.
So I'd experienced flashbacks before, but they would only be for a short period of time, which from doing some reading would probably be that the fuse between my primal brain and my long-term memory had probably fixed enough for it to go through and filter through.
Yeah.
But at the point that I was told that he took his life, from that point on for 4 years, I had flashbacks to different deaths. If I spoke his name or spoke about him, which people would do, I'd permanently see two scenes, which were both suicides, at all times whilst talking about him. And then at the same time, I would have flashbacks to the worst scene that I'd ever been to.
Right.
Like I would play with my son, and he would have a decomposed hand. So we'd be playing, normal. I'd look away, look back, and his hand would be jet black, skin falling off of it, fluid coming out of it. And that was my life for 4 years.
How the fuck do you deal with that? Pardon my language. In fact, don't pardon my language.
Badly.
Okay, so...
Would be my honest answer.
Well, that's very honest. I mean, okay, so understanding the reality of this, right, is when you're in normal everyday life, superimposed onto things in such a real way, you think that your son's hand is in that state.
Yeah.
How do you react to that? Or did you not? Or, in that moment you see that?
Trying not to.
Yeah.
So over the course of time, like the first time it happened, completely taken back to that scene and shut down. Like all emotion shut down in that moment. And as the years went on, I normalised that was normal life now, and that's how life was going to be.
Okay.
So then when it happens, it's a case of, oh, it's happened, right, move on.
Right.
Not healthy.
Did you tell anyone about it when it started happening? Or did you deal with it
I'd
yourself?
spoken that I'd had flashbacks, but never in any detail. And for me, the first 2 years after it had happened, I was consumed by guilt.
Right.
So he had a young family, and I viewed every day for 2 years that his children didn't have their dad because of me. That was all my fault.
So direct result of your actions, they didn't have a dad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which isn't true.
No.
And if I look at it from my rational part of the brain, which is what I always tried to do, it wasn't my fault.
No.
But emotionally, that part of my brain always took over for those 2 years and went, it's your fault. I'd cry myself to sleep. After that, I'd go to bed. I'm naturally nocturnal. I'd cry myself to sleep most nights because it just consumed me.
It's too much.
And every day that I went to work going to war, because that's how I had to get myself in the zone to go to work, because I couldn't let, it felt like I couldn't let my personality slip at work, which was always having a laugh, a joke, enjoying myself and working hard. And I went to work going to war because I didn't want people looking at me going, yeah, he should have got the job.
No,
the wrong
absolutely.
person got the
Yeah,
job.
yeah, got that.
And that always played on my mind.
Yeah.
But the pressure that I put myself under at work was then I had to be perfect every day.
Right. I think if you're in a situation where you see yourself as responsible, and also you've got a job, you've got something over the person that's no longer there, that's going to lead to all kinds of guilt anyway, regardless of where you end up.
Yeah.
So when was there a breaking point where you had to ask for help, or did somebody see it?
No, so for me, I wore a mask very, very well. There's different points for me where I had to push myself to a different phase.
Yeah.
So after 2 years, I made a decision that I was going to kill myself.
Okay.
I was going to do it at the same place he did, the same way that he did, because I felt safe in that location, because I felt like I'd be with him as I did it.
Do you think you thought it would be successful and easy because he'd already done it before you?
I thought it would stop me from eating myself up every day. I felt like the person that I wasn't good enough for my little boy, my little girl, and for my missus.
Okay.
And I needed that pain to stop because it consumed me.
Right. Can I ask, you do know that you're good enough for them now,
Yeah,
right?
I do.
Right. Amazing.
But at that 2 year point, I was so tired from hurting that I wanted it to stop.
Okay.
So I knew the day I was going to do it, it was going to be on the back of one of my late shifts because my missus would be in bed, my little boy would be in bed. I can take myself off and do it quite easily.
No one would know.
And then one day I was sat on the sofa with my little boy on my missus's lap, and I couldn't put him through what my mate had put his kids through.
Yeah.
And I decided to bury the guilt and
Okay.
bury my feelings. That's how I dealt with it. That
Yeah.
was the old way in the police of that's how we deal with it. And being 18, when I joined, that's how I'd learned to deal with those things, was to bury them very deep inside and hope they never appeared.
Yeah.
So for 2 years after that point, I got by. I was a good dad at times. I was a good partner at times. But there was times when my frustration would seep out. I'd be irritable for no reason. I'd feel just angry for no reason, and it was seeping out into my life. And it was only when I went on a leadership course with work, and they were talking about now in the police what we should be doing around trauma. So if someone goes through a traumatic incident, within 48 hours we should do an informal debrief. Just to be able to talk through. There's no judgment, you're just going to talk through that scene. How is that person feeling that's gone to that scene and been subjected to it? And then you're going to follow it up 2 weeks later.
Right.
And I drove home after that day on that course and I cried the whole way home.
Right.
Going, I had never had any of that for any of the jobs I've been to.
No.
And it was at that stage I've gone, I need some help. Because this is just seeping into my life and I don't want that. I want to be the best dad, I want to be the best partner, and I want to be healthy. And I didn't feel healthy for 4 years.
it's impossible to feel healthy when you've got all that adversity, mental or real. I mean, to be fair, to highlight a truth, your real was those flashbacks, and that was real life. It wasn't, when you say flashbacks, a lot of people will go to LSD and all of that, and but flashbacks to the point of solidity, when we talk to Joe again, and I'm only bringing that in because it's reasonably similar, is that he, like, the guy was lying in the bed with him, and it was real. And I said, what, like a ghost? And he went, no, he was there. And that's how strong your mind is. Your mind then leads you down this path, and what I would take as a fiction, i.e. a flashback, is a reality. That's terrifying. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. But what's amazing, though, is then you reach the point where you realise you could ask for help. Do you think you were waiting, and this will sound a bit odd, but do you think you were waiting for permission to ask for help? Like, to see when it was possible to ask for help, and you saw a light on that situation?
I think for me, it was accepting that it was almost like my behaviour hadn't been good enough.
Okay.
And realising that things that have been put in place now that weren't in place when I went through those things, I needed to address that myself to get me back to being the best person that I can be.
Yeah.
For me as well, because I just want to be happy. Like, anyone that knows me knows I just want to be happy. But I was sinking. And regardless of how much I could pull myself up, I treaded water for 4 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, and I was tired. I'm not a tired person, but for 4 years I was exhausted, because I'd go to work and I'd be the person that everyone knew me to be. I wasn't the person that I was in that moment, and I was just drained. I was going home tired. I couldn't play with my little boy at times because I was tired. Sometimes I didn't want to play with my little boy because I didn't want to see those things.
Yeah.
And like, another one of the triggers would be dog walkers, because one of the bad scenes I went to, the person had been partially eaten by their own dog.
Right.
So I put off seeing my parents because they've got lots of dogs. So I know that if I go and see them, I'm probably going to have a flashback.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, the sad thing about everything is that you don't often realise, right, especially back a few years, you don't often realise that asking for help is okay, simply because usually it's not. You know, in a lot of circumstances, asking for help just a couple of years ago was seen as weakness.
Yeah.
But also not necessarily outward perception, but inward perception.
Yeah.
I am weak, I ask for help. It took me 48 years to ask for help with anxiety, because I thought, well, I'm a man, I'm a man's man as well, and I'm hard and I can do whatever. And then I realised, actually, no, I'm actually a bit fucked up. But okay, so let's look at PTSD, right? Right, post-traumatic stress disorder means that you have seen so many things and you've done so many things that have triggered your brain to not be able to do it. I mean, is that what that is?
I mean, it wasn't just flashbacks. I mean, I was driving to work having panic attacks.
Okay.
The anxiety, then the depression that comes with it, and the permanent battle of anxiety and depression pulling me in different ways.
Yeah.
The bad stomachs, the eat food, 10 minutes later, I'm straight in the toilet.
Yeah.
That's 4 years. Since I've done therapy, that's lessened. It's the physical reaction to how I was feeling. I just put it down to shift work. I put it down to poor diet. The symptoms go on and on and on.
Yeah.
It was my life. It was my whole life. No matter what it was impacted by everything that I'd been through.
Because you're in a permanent state of stress, I suppose, aren't you?
Yeah,
because you're
without realising,
fighting against the reality, your reality. Also, I mean, PTSD is there are times when people that have been through situations that they dwell on and it's okay, but they do move past it. Once you get to a saturation point, that's PTSD, where you cannot function without either masking up completely, putting on a full body suit to go and cheat the world for another day. Okay, so how were you diagnosed with that?
So I self-certified to be off work. So basically I started therapy. I referred myself through work, got put through to a therapist, and she said, look, I've looked at your symptoms, I've looked at what you've been through. I think a treatment called EMDR would be suitable for you.
Which is?
I cannot remember what EMDR stands for. I would describe it as witchcraft, though. That's the only way. It's the only way I can describe EMDR. So it's a type of therapy that deals around trauma, whether that be things that you've seen, whether it be some kind of abuse that you've been subjected to. But it's a type of therapy that can be used to help you with processing that.
Okay.
So the first 2 sessions that I did weren't EMDR, they were just standard therapy. The first session, after that, I started to grieve my friend for the first time in 4 years. And I didn't realise I hadn't grieved.
Yep.
The second session, I accepted that I was angry at him. And part of me hated him for what he'd done to his family, but also what he'd done to me.
Yep.
Because of how I'd been feeling ever since. And that was my first 2 sessions. And it was at that point I was geared up for my third session. I'd always do it on a Tuesday because I wanted a set day that I was going to do it. So I knew when it would be.
Yep.
And I could plan my week around it and how I would potentially react to the therapy as well. So I was coming up to the third session and I was basically sat at my desk and everyone's going, "Oh, you're right." And I'm like, "Yeah, glorious." My response at work, if anyone asks me how I am, is glorious.
Right.
It's been the same answer for I don't know how many years. And that was part of my mask. And then one day I sat there and I thought, I can't do this. And I said to myself, I'm not fit for duty. I'm not fit to make a critical decision around the stuff that I deal with.
Yep.
That's not fair on my team. It's not fair on me to put myself, my boss in that position or the public in that position. So I pulled my boss and I said, "Look, can I have a chat?" We went into a side room. I'm really good friends with him. And I broke down in tears and went, "This is what I'm feeling." And he went, "Yeah, of course you are. You should be feeling like this because this is what you've been through. This is what you're talking about. It's completely natural." He's a fantastic bloke.
So no judgment, no bullshit. No. That's amazing.
Do you think you would have got that reaction 10 years earlier? Not necessarily from him, from someone else.
It would come down to the person.
Yeah.
But him, fantastic. I couldn't have asked for any more in that moment of me accepting I'm at my low point. I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm having panic attacks, I need to address this. So I signed myself off for a week and then I had to go to the doctors then to certify because I needed some more time off. And the doctor, I did an online referral, went to see the doctor, she went, "You've got PTSD, clear as day," because of what I documented in when I've sent it in. So we had to do the survey for PTSD. And then it was a case of, right, medication, have you considered it? And for me, I didn't want to medicate because I wanted to do the therapy with a clearer mind as possible.
So you needed to feel.
And I needed that raw going through it. And then at the other end, it was a case of I'd assess where I am then.
Yep.
So it was a case of I got signed off. I had 7 weeks off in the end whilst I continued to do therapy. So the EMDR therapy, have you ever done it, read up on it? Sometimes called light therapy.
I know a bit about it. Yeah.
So it'd be one of the ways it's done is you'll follow a light going across or a finger, and then you'll basically go to one of the things that's maybe causing you some issues. For me, it was a tapping therapy. So I tap, and it would always be a scene. So it was always a suicide. So I'd start at the suicide with a negative emotional feeling about myself to do with that scene. You'd focus on that. And then you'd pause and your mind would take you to a different emotion or a different feeling or a different place. So first session was, it was a body in a river, been there a couple of weeks, decomposed, not the worst thing I've ever seen.
No.
Which is quite strange to say.
Yeah.
Probably worse than anything I've ever seen, but carry on.
So that's how my session started, and my session ended. The MDR part ended with me stood in front of the version of myself 4 years ago before I got PTSD. And it was in that moment I realised that I'd lost a big part of myself. And then, so that scene itself, I could see clear as day. That was one of the 2 scenes I'd see if I talked about my mate. Kind of like processed it, broke down with my partner afterwards and was like, I've just realised this is a massive part of what I've lost, is myself. Went to bed, woke up the following morning, and that scene that I could see clear as day the day before was now like it had happened 5 years ago when it had actually happened.
So it turned from present to a memory.
Yeah.
rather than a flashback.
Yeah. So it
Fucking
moved
hell.
past from that emotional part of my brain and moved to the long-term memory.
Is that because, and I'm going to use puerile terms because I'm feeling a bit dumb today, but is it because you picked it up and looked at it, that situation, analysed it, seen it for what it was?
Thing is, with the EMDR, you're not analysing that scene itself.
No?
You are basically going with that negative, raw feeling and emotion about yourself,
Right.
and your mind just takes you on a journey.
Right.
So my second EMDR session was a shotgun to the head,
Right.
which I dealt with the same day that I dealt with the body in the river.
It's a heavy day at work.
Yeah. So started off there, and at the end of the journey that my mind had taken me on, I was basically stood in, it was like the Grand Canyon, but a smaller version, and there was a cargo net in between the two. And I had to take a leap of faith, and I couldn't do it.
Right.
So bear in mind, I've started off as somebody who's been shot in the head with a shotgun. I'm now there, and I've got to make a leap, and my 6-year-old comes into shot, puts his hands on my shoulders and goes, "Daddy, it'll be okay." And I jumped. So you're not processing in detail what you've seen and what you've been having the flashbacks to as such.
Processing the feelings.
And your feelings and your mind is then taking you on a journey of emotions.
What's
Is that guided by the therapist?
It is, yeah.
Okay, so you're literally inside your mind thinking about these situations. Fucking hell, you're right. It is witchcraft.
Yeah, which is why I describe it that way, because it's hard to describe what your irrational part of the brain is doing and how it's being treated.
There's different methods. There's pods as well, isn't there? Vibrating
Yeah.
pods and stuff. That it's all about the fact. It's like the TikTok, I guess. It's where the kind of myth of hypnotism comes from. That your eyes are focusing on two different things, or you're going buzz, 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 tapping. It's about that rhythmic stuff.
Okay.
It is witchcraft.
Yeah.
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 So witchcraft, basically.
Okay, good. Right. Well,
But
see,
incredibly
witchcraft exists.
Yeah.
He said it. Okay, so you've got the diagnosis and you're in treatment.
I've finished treatment.
Yeah.
So I've completed the therapy that I was allocated, and it closed off quite naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd previously done therapy before for something completely unrelated. Hated the experience. It was terrible. When I entered this one, it was a case of I need to be as open and honest as possible to get the most out of it, because I realised I was sinking.
You were ready for
Yeah.
therapy. I haven't had a similar experience, but I went to therapy once. I was diagnosed with PTSD basically because I was in a gunfight, and one of my friends died, and it was all bullshit. But they diagnosed me with PTSD, and I completely ignored it.
Yep.
Just completely ignored it, and I think that's where it stems. So I was sent to therapy, went to therapy, sat in a room, and decided that the best course of action was me to wind up the therapist in lots of things and see how clever he was.
Yeah.
Because obviously I'm desperately clever, and the only trouble with that, of course, is I didn't seek help because I thought it was all bullshit.
Yeah.
You, like addiction, if you're an addict, which I am, 15 years, like clean of that, but when you're ready to get clean, you will.
Yeah.
And until you are, you won't. So it's the same with therapy. If you're not ready to do that kind of therapy, because to get inside your head to that fashion is fucking terrifying.
Were you given different options of what type of therapy to have, or was that
So
recommended? Or?
through work, it is a case of you refer through to a therapist. And by chance, my therapist had also completed EMDR training. She's looked at kind of my symptoms, what I've been through, and gone, this is what I recommend. This is what I feel would be beneficial for you. Thank God that she did.
And you were just open to whatever she was good, because she was the expert,
and
basically.
On the first meeting that me and her had, it was a case of, she said, "Look, what do you need from me?" And I said, "Look, first therapist I ever went and saw, I caught her clock watching. Turns out she had a clock between my feet." And in that point, with that therapist, excuse the language, I fucked her to get out of the room as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
Complete my sessions, done. Whereas this, I said, "Look, this is what I need from you, and this is what I'll give you." And I gave her everything. I remember doing the first EMDR session. It was on a Tuesday, and on the Friday I was at home on my own, and I cried myself for about 2 hours, going, "What have I done to myself?
Yeah.
Why have I opened this box that I'd buried deep inside me?" Because it felt like I'd unleashed hell on myself.
I think that the key point of that, and something to say out loud, is the fact that unless you are open to
Yeah.
undoing Pandora's box. And that's what it is. Everyone's got a personal Pandora's box.
Everyone has.
Right? If you're not strong enough, that's not a reason not to open it. The reason not to open it is you're not prepared to take the truth that comes out of it. And what is amazing is somebody who has seen as much as you have. And also taking it in your stride. It's your job. This is my job. This is every day. Right? In one day, you saw a bloated, decomposed corpse in a river, and then a headless or whatever man who's shot themselves with a shotgun in the same fucking day. Right? Just to quantify that, the next time that you slag off a policeman, right? Because you have to understand the reality of what they do as well. There are a lot of things in this world that we couldn't cope with as human beings that you have to cope with.
Yeah.
And I will freely admit, I've seen my fair share of badness, but I don't, never twice in one day. So I mean that's greedy, if anything.
Yeah.
Right.
We try not to, but sometimes we just can't help ourselves.
Yeah, well, I get that. If you're gonna want to see all of it, then you kind of did. And I'm not making light of this for any other reason than it's fucking horrific.
Yeah.
So if we were to look at the actual horror of that situation from your point, everyone would go, "Oh my God."
Well, you said, didn't you, years ago, you would all deal with it with a bit of banter and a bit of humour and a bit of stuff.
But that's so valid a point.
Yeah.
Right. So look, if you're in a situation where you've had all this trauma and stress, but all these people around you feel comfortable enough to just say what you're feeling, which is fucking hell, I need a drink, or, I saw this, I saw that. And then it's a communal talk. Yeah. That's why group therapy sometimes works for people, especially if you're in a group of peers.
Yes. Because
they understand. And they know why you're making that joke. If you and I were in the room and you were making jokes about what you'd just seen, I'd be like, what the fuck? Yeah. But you have to do that. And it's not disrespectful. It's a coping mechanism.
It's interesting how it was just a natural thing that is exactly what everyone needed. Yeah. And it petered out, as you say, because of pressures of life and whatever.
Yeah, and time, and who's got time?
And now you've got to pay a professional to do that for you and go through the trauma you've been through to get to that point to need that. It's really sad, isn't it?
It is sad, yeah. And the trouble comes when the higher ups get involved in how things are dealt with and make a false move. Yeah. So they provide you, this is what you do. Well, fuck off, I'm going to do what I want to do. Yeah. No, this is what you do. Now, nowadays, presumably, that trigger for you to say, right, I need to do this, was also, you could see that they were moving in the right direction. Yeah. So even whether if it was conscious or not, you went, I've just heard what I really needed.
Yeah, and that was the thing. I identified there was two things that are in place now that weren't in place when I was dealing with those scenes. Mm. And if I can't say whether or not I'd have been in a better position having done them, but having experience of just chatting about jobs after work with your colleagues, knowing it helps, those debriefs potentially would have put me in a lot better position to not have experienced what I've been through for the last few years.
So now you've done the therapy, obviously these things don't just go away.
No.
But how do you feel? How are you now? How are you not in the moment as like a whole? How are you now with dealing with the new things that you see?
So I'm in a department where I don't deal directly with death anymore. Okay. So I'm in a great place from that point of view. Mm. I only completed therapy partway through September, so it's all...
This is all still fresh?
Yeah.
Oh, fucking hell. Okay.
Yeah, so it's all fresh. So I'm very conscious that the wound is open still. It's not as open as it was. But I'm mindful of that and conscious of what will I expose myself to as the years go on, because the career's a long career. I've done 22 years, I've got a number of years to go. So at some point I'll move into a role that may involve death. So I basically, at work, I've put my hand up and said, I can't deal with death. If I put more trauma on top of what I've already closed off, I feel that potentially that's going to reopen the box that I've put in a comfortable place. I feel in a healthy place with my head around those aspects that I've talked about.
Amazing, yeah.
And I don't want to put any more stress on my brain in regards to death. And work have gone, agree. They've been fantastic.
Fucking hell.
I had to get referred back into our occupational health unit.
Yeah.
I've spoken with a force doctor. He was amazing, fantastic. We just had an honest chat about what I've been through, where my brain is at now compared to where it was with all of this going on. And he agreed. It's a case of, no, death isn't for you. So I've been signed off dealing with death directly for 12 months, and it'll be my decision on whether or not I feel comfortable after that period of dealing with it again. 10 years ago, that probably wouldn't have happened.
No.
Whereas the place we're in now as an organisation, that's where we're moving in the right direction.
Well, also nowadays as well, people realise, and dehumanising it totally, people realise what assets they have.
Yeah.
And you're obviously good at what you do, you know, because you're still there.
Yeah.
So it's good to see that in some ways the police are understanding the people that they have, instead of making blanket statements about who does what. Everyone needs to address what they've seen, where they've been, and talk about it, and give the opportunity to heal. Even if they don't take it, that's their choice. And I think in an organisation that is so rule orientated, but usually the wrong way for somebody, that's amazing to hear that now the door's open for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I will do my job, but I will limit my death exposure.
Yeah.
If I could speak, that'd be handy, wouldn't it? Okay, so still raw, still there, but in a place that you're comfortable with. Like you put that box, as you called it, somewhere where it's comfortable. Now, the thing is that at no point does that box disappear completely, because that box is who you are.
Yeah.
And I think I think that there are important things in life that you deal with, and it's not necessarily the subject matter completely, it's how you get to a place of peace. So what might be right for you may not be right for somebody else, but the overall concept of talking and healing is what got you where you are now.
Yeah, it is.
What's amazing is that you can still, theoretically speaking, put that uniform on, because you don't wear a uniform now, presumably, being a DC. But if I don't know if I could be you, your strength is amazing. And obviously, you don't want me being you, that would be all bad. But what I'm trying to allude to is that to understand the level and the depths that your mind went to, and to come back from that is huge.
Yeah.
Right? We can talk about all the details and all the ins and outs, but what you have to understand, the people watching, is the fact that however bad a situation gets, when you're ready to deal with it, you can. And there is usually a system that can help you. Having poo-pooed the whole therapy thing myself, I'm now training to be a therapist in one way. I'm also working as a recovery worker with addicts.
Yeah.
You know, and doing things which I'm now ready to do 15 years later, which I wasn't ready before. I couldn't have helped anyone. And we talked about this before. When I got clean, the first reaction of both me and my brother and a load of other people who I know that are addicts was to go, I must help the world because now I am gifted with knowledge.
Yep.
What you actually need to do is shut the fuck up and take a back seat.
Yeah.
Right? And get through that. But my brother Sean is a substance misuse worker, but he now has gone from frontline bottom to full-on management. Runs a huge project. He's awesome. Sean, he's been on the show, but what he achieves, because he knows addict behaviour. Yeah. And at my job, I understand that, these people are using, and we're not there to change their lives, but we're there to give them a structure, and we help them facilitate their lives so they don't die.
Yeah.
So, you know, the message, if there is one, is even though you had arrived at suicide's door and you'd made a plan. Can I ask you about that?
Yeah.
Just very quickly, once you'd made the plan and you'd made peace with that, did you feel better in that moment?
I felt calmer. So for about a week on the run-up, I was the calmest I'd been for 2 years.
Right. Because there was an end in sight?
Yeah, I had peace with myself because the decision was made.
Exactly what Joe said.
That fucks me up. Yeah, you know, you happy is a different thing, but Chris Sibley's son as well said that before he was going around saying goodbye and being happy and helping people.
Yeah.
Blows my mind. Okay, what does the future hold for you?
For me?
Yeah.
My priority is always my family. I'll be the best dad I can, the best partner I can, and be happy whilst doing it and have more energy to do things like that.
That's cool.
So for 4 years, I put it down to COVID that it felt like I had a cloud at the back of my head. So I couldn't retain information like I could. My memory was shit. It was worse than how I'd normally function. And I completed my therapy and that cloud lifted. Like I'm operating with a clear head and I'm happy, which means that I just get to be I love being a dad. I just want to be silly. But then when I'm at work, it means that I'm not stressed.
Then you can have the gravity you need at the time you need.
But
also, you see, the key there is you can be all things to all men. Right? So your little boy needs to play. Yeah, you've got a daughter as well?
Yeah.
Right? So all your kids need you to be what they want you to be at that moment. Your partner, you need to be supported, but also, you know, go out to dinner, have a laugh, do the things. Now you can be that because you're free of that cloud. And that cloud is your brain literally not being able to process where you're at.
Do you have any maintenance stuff you do for yourself mentally?
So part of each therapy session, we always created a safe space at the end, because I said it was important for me. So in the terrible therapy I had, once that therapist opened something up and then went, "We'll run out of time, off you go." So a key thing for me was to make sure that we safely closed off each of the sessions. So basically I had a safe space that I would go to. It was a happy place. And it was a physical place that I've been to. So I basically picture myself at the top of my stairs in my mind, and I'll be doing a breathing exercise. So it was always breathe in for 7 seconds, hold it for 7 seconds, breathe out for 7 seconds. Always a challenge when you vape. So I'd start at the top of the stairs and I'd slowly walk down them to my lounge door. I'd open the door and then I was at my safe, happy place. Which was a bench in the woods that I go to when I'm biking. So we'd always close off and do that. So now my anxiety levels have dropped. I haven't had panic attacks. But if I'm feeling amped up, I'll take myself still to that place to just bring myself back down, just so I'm at a more comfortable place in my head. Because I'm conscious that it's always going to be there.
Yeah.
But I've got better tools from doing the therapy to be able to bring myself back down if I'm heightened.
Do you know what? If that isn't a coping mechanism for 50 and coping, what is? Right, I hate to tell you this, but we have run out of time, and I'm not sure how, but this happens a lot. I can't thank you enough for coming on.
No, thank you for having me.
That's amazing. I do want to say, and we do say this a lot, right? Rely on yourself to make a judgment about who you are, where you're at in life, and whether you need help or not. And please, if you do need help, don't shy away from it. There are people, organisations, and everything around that can help you. If you need direct help, Mind, you know, all of that. Go to Mind organisation if you've got mental health problems. If you are needing suicide help, the Samaritans are right there. Okay, if you need pastoral things and you're lonely, come and see me at Coffee and Coping in Stansted Abbas. There are 3 drop-ins a week. Everyone around me at this point is geared up to help you guys find some way to cope. So we're here for you if you need us. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next time.